The chick was still alive when the rats reached it. It was a seabird, days old, sitting in a scrape on the ground of a small island in Palau because its species had evolved on islands where nothing hunted on foot. It had no burrow. Its parents were out over open ocean. It could not run, and it did not know it should. The rats came up the beach after dark and ate it where it sat, and then they moved along the shoreline and did the same to the next one, and the next. And by the time the adults came back with food, there was nothing left to feed. That happened every night, on island after island, for decades, and it is happening tonight on islands where nobody has intervened yet. On Ulong Island, the rats had become so numerous that they had stopped bothering to be nocturnal at all. Rats are night animals. They avoid daylight because daylight is when things kill them. On Ulong, they were being seen in the open in the middle of the day, running across campsites, going through equipment so abundant that the population had outgrown the cover of darkness. That is what a rat population looks like when it has run out of competition and has more food than it can use. The island was, functionally, theirs. And out on that island where seabirds should have been nesting in their thousands, researchers walking transects found almost none. That is the sentence that matters. Very few nesting seabirds that we would find is how Coral Wolf, the conservation science program manager who designed the survey, described it. That is a tropical Pacific island in one of the most biologically rich marine regions on Earth, with almost nothing nesting on it. So they killed every rat on it. All of them. Deliberately, in a single coordinated operation, and then they went back a year later with instruments to measure exactly what had changed on the land and in the water. What they found in the water offshore was not what anybody had predicted, and it has rewritten the expected timeline for this kind of work by about 2 decades. Rats did not swim to Palau. They arrived in the holds of ships, the way they have arrived almost everywhere else in the Pacific, stepping off cargo onto islands whose entire biology had been assembled over millions of years without a single ground predator in it. Seabirds nest on the ground and in low scrub on remote islands precisely because nothing on those islands eats eggs. It is a strategy that works perfectly until the moment it does not, and then it fails completely, because the birds have no defensive behavior to fall back on. They do not hide their nests. They do not mob a ground predator. They do not fight. They sit, because sitting is what has worked for every generation before them, and an instinct that has been correct for 1,000,000 years does not update in the 50 years since a ship arrived. A rat is an opportunistic omnivore, which means it eats whatever is available and switches to whatever is easiest. And on a seabird island, the easiest available calorie is an egg or a chick that cannot move. The damage does not stop at birds. Palau's Rock Island's southern lagoon is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, listed in part for endemic birds, mammals, reptiles, amphibians, and plants that exist there and nowhere else, and the rats went through all of it. The Micronesian scrub fowl, a ground-dwelling megapode, buries its eggs in mounds and its chicks dig their own way out and emerge alone, without a parent, which makes a newly hatched megapode about the most defenseless object on a tropical island. Hawksbill sea turtles, critically endangered, come ashore on the sandy beaches of these islands to lay, and Nyangas is one of the most important marine turtle nesting sites in the Rock Islands. Their hatchlings have to cross open sand to the water, at night, slowly, in a straight line, which is close to a definition of easy prey. The Palau flying fox, a bat found nowhere else on Earth, depends on fruit and nectar from trees whose seeds and flowers the rats were also eating, so the damage reached species the rats never directly touched. Strip the fruiting trees and you have removed the food supply of everything that lives on fruit. And the damage ran into people's kitchens as well. On Kayangel Atoll, an inhabited island of around 60 residents, the rats had reached a density where visitors asking for bananas were told there were none, because the rats got to them before anybody else could. An entire island's fruit supply was being intercepted before harvest. Rats on a small island are not a nuisance in the way a rat in a city is a nuisance. They are a competing population eating the same food, in a place where the food cannot simply be trucked in from somewhere else. That is the situation the eradication programs were built to reverse, and the method they use is far more brutal and far more precise than most people imagine. There is no trapping. Trapping cannot work at this scale, because eradication is not population control, and the difference between the two is the entire discipline. Killing 95% of the rats on an island achieves close to nothing. A pair of rats can produce several litters in a year, and those young are breeding within months, so the survivors rebuild the population to capacity within a season. Worse, you have selected for exactly the individuals clever enough to avoid your traps, and their offspring inherit the caution. The target is every single animal. One pregnant female left alive means the operation has failed and the money is gone, and you will not know for a year because you cannot prove an absence quickly. Confirmation that an island is genuinely rat-free requires returning months later with detection devices and finding nothing at all, repeatedly. So the method is bait, distributed across every square meter of the island simultaneously. Every rat on that island has a home range it moves through, and the grid has to be tight enough that no home range anywhere on the landmass can fit between the bait points. No rat can complete its normal night without encountering a lethal dose. On Kayangel, that meant field workers cutting transects through the whole island by hand, then marking points along every transect, then spreading out across the grid with buckets and hand-casting pellets across the ground until the entire landmass had been covered. The active ingredient is brodifacoum, an anticoagulant, used at low concentration. And the community that lives there accepted a consequence that is rarely mentioned in the coverage of these projects. There was a moratorium of about a year on eating crabs, chickens, pigs, and other local food from the island, because bait in the environment moves through the food chain and nobody was willing to guess. 60 people gave up the animals they eat for a year to remove rats from the place they live on the word of scientists about a benefit they could not yet see. That is not a conservation gesture. That is a community absorbing a real cost on the basis of a promise about what happens afterwards. The results came island by island, and the first one inside the World Heritage Area landed in 2017. Rats were removed from Kayangel Island that year in a project led by the Koror State Department of Conservation and Law Enforcement, together with Island Conservation and the Palau Conservation Society. And in September of 2018, the island was confirmed free of invasive rodents. It was the first successful rodent eradication ever completed within the Rock Island's southern lagoon, which meant it was also the proof of concept for everything that followed. Nobody funds a second operation until the first one has been confirmed. On Kayangel, the megapode population began to rebound almost immediately once the chicks emerging from those nest mounds were no longer walking straight into a rat. Captive birds were also returned to the island once it was safe, and the recovery was visible to the people running the project rather than something detectable only in statistics. Hawksbill hatchlings crossing the sand had one fewer predator waiting for them. The operation on Kayangel ran across March and April of 2018, delivered by a partnership of the Kayangel community, the Palau Conservation Society, the Kayangel State Government, BirdLife International and Island Conservation, with support from state rangers. If it worked, it would be the first inhabited island in Palau cleared of rats. And it did work, and the bananas came back. The outcome was confirmed in 2019, a year after the bait went down, once enough time had passed to be certain that nothing had survived. Then in 2024 the technology changed, and it changed in a way that makes the next 100 islands cheaper than the last 60. On Nurkaklau, the bait was delivered by drone, and it was the first successful drone-based rat eradication ever completed in Micronesia. A drone flies a programmed grid, covers terrain that people cannot easily walk, and puts bait into places a person with a bucket cannot reach. It does it faster, with fewer people, and without sending anybody up a cliff or through mangrove with a load on their back. It also produces a record, a flight log showing precisely which parts of the island were covered and at what density, which matters enormously when the entire operation fails if a single patch is missed. If a story about a country that removed every rat from a series of islands and then went back with instruments to measure exactly what returned is worth your time, take a moment to subscribe, because the thing they eventually recorded was not on the island at all. And this is where the work stopped being conservation and became an experiment, because a recovery you cannot measure against anything is not evidence. It is an anecdote. Islands change for all sorts of reasons. A good year of rain, a shift in ocean temperature, a marine heat wave, a storm that reshapes a beach and takes a section of reef with it. Any of those could produce a year of improved numbers on an island that had also just had its rats removed, and there would be no way to tell which had done it. If you remove rats from an island and things get better, you have not established that the rats were the cause. So on Ulong Island, the team designed something more rigorous. Coral Wolf, Conservation Science Program Manager at Island Conservation, set it up as a controlled comparison. Before anything was done, baseline data was gathered on Ulong across a deliberately wide range of measurements. Acoustic recordings of bird calls, soil samples, estimates of fish biomass in the surrounding water, and coral cover on the nearby reef. That combination is unusual. Most island restoration projects measure the island. This one was built from the beginning to measure the sea as well, on the assumption that the two were connected and that nobody had yet proved it. Then the same measurements were taken on Ngeruktabal, a nearby island, which was left exactly as it was, rats included. Ngeruktabal was the control, and choosing it was not a small decision. Somebody had to look at an island with a rat problem inside the same World Heritage Lagoon and deliberately leave it that way for the duration of the study. Every seabird chick eaten on Ngeruktabal during those 2 years was part of the experimental design. It would receive no intervention of any kind and would be measured on the same schedule so that any change on Ulong could be checked against what was happening anyway in that part of Palau. This design is called before-after control impact, and its entire purpose is to separate the effect of the action from the background noise of a changing world. It is standard in medicine and rare in island conservation because it requires resources, patience, and the willingness to spend 2 years measuring an island you are deliberately not helping. Then they removed the rats from Ulong. Every one. The same method as the other islands. Total coverage, no survivors, no partial success available as an outcome. And 12 months later, the survey was repeated on both islands. On land, the first thing the instruments picked up was sound. The acoustic recorders on Ulong registered a surge in seabird activity against the control island where the rats remained. Recorders run continuously and do not get tired, miss things or scare birds off, which is why sound is increasingly how this kind of change gets caught. Detections of bridled tern calls rose by 286%, close to 4 times the activity, over the same island, in the same recorders, 1 year apart. Brown noddy and white tern calls increased by roughly 50%, which on an island that had been effectively emptied of nesting seabirds is a substantial return rather than a rounding error. Researchers also recorded increased sightings of the Palau ground dove, a rare and endangered bird that nests and feeds low down and has a very poor record of coexisting with introduced predators. A ground dove on a rat island is a species living on borrowed time. 12 months. Not a generation, not a decade. 12 months from the removal of the rats to a measurable near tripling of one species calls over the island, and acoustic monitoring is a conservative measure. A recorder counts calls, not birds, and it cannot tell you how many nests succeeded or how many chicks fledged. What it tells you is that the airspace over that island suddenly had far more seabird in it than the airspace over the island next door, and the mechanism that carried the effect off the island and into the sea is the part that had been theorized for years and never demonstrated under controlled conditions. A seabird is a nutrient pump. It feeds at sea, sometimes far offshore, catching fish and squid, and then it flies back to a specific island to roost and to feed its chicks. What it deposits there, in guano, is nitrogen and phosphorus that originated in the ocean, often far offshore. A colony of thousands of birds doing this daily moves a genuinely large quantity of marine nutrient onto a small piece of land. Scientists have taken to calling it the circular seabird economy. The birds forage on fish, they bring those nutrients back to the island, and the island then leaks them back into the shallow water around it through rain and runoff. A healthy seabird colony fertilizes its own reef continuously, for free, in quantities that matter. Tropical reef water is famously nutrient poor, which is part of why reefs are so efficient at recycling what they have, and an input of nitrogen and phosphorus arriving steadily off an island is not a marginal addition to that system. It has been doing so for as long as there have been seabirds and reefs, and the arrangement is completely invisible until you break it. Rats break it by removing the birds, and the break is silent. Nothing visible happens to the reef on the day the last seabird colony fails. The nutrient flow simply stops, and the effect accumulates over years in a way that nobody standing on the beach would ever connect to a rodent. No colony, no guano, no nutrient transfer, and the reef immediately offshore is quietly starved of an input it evolved alongside. That is why an island infestation is not only an island problem. And it is also why nobody expected quick results, because the assumption running through the whole field was that even if you fix the island, the marine side would take a very long time to respond. Seabird colonies rebuild slowly. Birds are long-lived. They return to the site where they were hatched rather than settling wherever looks suitable. And many species will not nest unless other birds are already nesting. Re-establishing a colony from near zero was expected to take many years before it produced enough nutrient flow to matter. Then, that flow would have to accumulate in the soil and reach the water. Then the algae and the small organisms at the base of the reef food web would have to respond. Then the fish, then eventually the corals themselves. Stacked end to end, the expected timeline for any measurable marine benefit ran into decades. Conservation organizations had been planning and fundraising on that basis, which meant the marine benefits of removing rats were essentially unbankable. You cannot ask a government or a donor to fund an operation on the strength of a reef improvement that might show up after the people signing the check have retired. And that is what the water around Ulong actually showed, 12 months after the last rat died. Fish biomass in the water around Ulong increased. Coral cover showed gains, not projected gains, not modeled gains, measured in the same units by the same team against the same baseline they had taken before the operation. Both were measured against Ngeruktabil, the control island where nothing had been done, and where the rats were still running, and where those indicators had not moved in the same way. 1 year. The reef offshore of the island responded inside a single year to an action taken on land, and the researchers linked those marine changes directly to the restored flow of seabird nutrients into nearshore waters. This is the first experimental evidence that ecosystems can rebound this fast. It means the standard estimate for how long island restoration takes to reach the sea was wrong by roughly an order of magnitude, and it was wrong in the direction that almost never happens in ecology, where the surprises are usually worse than expected, rather than better. Everything that follows from that is practical, rather than philosophical. Island conservation has now restored 63 islands worldwide, benefiting 1,173 populations across 468 species and subspecies, and every one of those projects was justified on a cost-benefit calculation that assumed the marine returns were distant and uncertain. If the reef responds in a year, rather than in 30, the entire economics of rat eradication changes. It moves from a long-horizon biodiversity project into something closer to a fisheries investment, with a measurable return arriving inside a single funding cycle, and fisheries are something finance ministries already understand how to value. And it changes the case that can be made to a community being asked to stop eating its own crabs for 12 months, because the answer to what do we get is no longer a promise about grandchildren. And the detail that makes the whole thing land is the one nobody set out to test. The measurements that recorded the reef recovering were taken from a control and impact design that also, unavoidably, recorded what was happening on Ngeruktabil. That island is still there, a short distance across the water, still carrying its rats, its seabird calls still flat, its reef still receiving nothing from a colony that is not there. It is the same water, the same weather, the same lagoon, and the same year. Every variable that could be blamed for the difference applies equally to both. Two islands within sight of each other, one of which had every rat on it killed, and the difference between them is now measurable in the fish swimming off the beach. And if you want more true stories like this one, where the thing that saves a coral reef turns out to be a bucket of bait on dry land, subscribe, and the next one will be waiting for you.